let me tell you something, Whispy Woods. I'm just gonna stay right here and able to have a nice little swing to swing from knob to knob. And even then though, you were expected to see how, you know, you might as well able to get some little bit more sleepy, aren't you? And even then, as a result, I really can't guarantee you won't be sleeping for this point in time, but that's just how it is. Hey, what is going on, ladies and gentlemen? I'm Piglet here once again, and I'm back for some more yet again for the Maxi Toys videos. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to more Let's Play of Kirby's Epic Yarn for the Nintendo Wii, and the upcoming Kirby's Extra Epic Yarn for the new Nintendo 3DS if it's a possibility. So, yeah, last time we actually did manage to complete with more of those minigame challenges, excluding the new one that we actually did tackle, and that's the forms of Murray's Race. And today for this episode, ladies and gentlemen, is the fact that we're going to be exploring through the final main world of the game, and that's the forms of Dreamland. So, because of how the fact that we're going to have to restore everything in the forms of Dreamland itself, so if that's the case, then we should able to actually just manage to defeat Yun once and for all, once we're able to actually explore through 4 of those levels first. See, for then, let's get this thing started to able to actually explore through the first level in Dreamland, and that's the forms of Whispy's Forest. So yeah, if you remember from the forms of the previous Kirby installments of the actual games themselves, you probably recognize this particular music theme, as you can tell from the background, because you know, if you remember from the forms of, you know, in any other previous adventures of Kirby, how the fact of the matter is that we can finally explore the Dreamland world itself. In fact, what I found is kind of odd is the fact that this might be the only Kirby game to able to actually feature about the fact that Dreamland might actually be the final main world of the game, because obviously that just like in Peach's Castle, but in forms of New Super Mario Bros. U / New Super Luigi U. Now, the fact of the matter is, though, we need to restore through everything in Peach's Castle. Oh yeah, must not forget New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe for the Nintendo Switch right now. So, expecting so that we should able to actually just go ahead and just, you know, discover some more secrets and find some hidden treasures and goodies, and you know the rest. So, the first treasure is very much obvious. Here's Whispy Woods right there. In fact, I really do enjoy this particular incarnation of this music in the background, but it forms of the remakes, or in this case, the Kirby's Epic Yarn portion of the forms of, well, Green Greens. In fact, we might actually just go ahead and just find that until we're able to actually just to get ourselves the actual CD music album. So even then, we'll find out as soon as we're able to get to that point. And, yeah, nothing else too much to say about this, other than that. Dreamland, as far as the actual final main world of Kirby's Epic Yarn, this might be a little bit difficult, but I will say it's not too difficult, pure difficult, unlike any forms of Space Land in my opinion, just because of how the fact that there won't be too many bottomless pits until the 3rd level in this world, but even then though, we'll explain more on that as soon as we're able to actually get to that level exponentially. So even then though, yeah, you might be recognize these familiar obstacles, mainly the forms of those little familiar doors, which act out very similar to how it does it in these little zipper teleportation zipper, or in this case the actual, like, well, you know. And basically, it allows you to able to actually traverse through hidden areas, and especially noticeable with this very well hidden secrets here and there, because even then, finding those doors can get pretty much tricky to get sometimes, because of how the fact that you have to explore for almost everything in this particular world. So here's the apple table, and also we're most likely familiar with those star blocks, and especially with those bomb blocks. But the thing is about these obstacles this time around though, since because of how the fact that it's all in a Kirby's Epic Yarn's aesthetics, this means we have to work on body forms of without even using any of those Kirby abilities. So we have to do this in a hard way fashion to able to actually just go ahead and just use the Kirby's Epic Yarn's moveset. So even then though, like basically in order to actually just manage to demolish most of those star blocks, especially with those bomb blocks, especially for that counts as well, you need to utilize the enemy's projectiles. Because of that, if you manage to able to aim this thing at this right point, then you would able to actually just go ahead and get rid of those blocks, even for star blocks, bomb blocks, you name it. So, expecting so, then yeah, that should be pleasant to able to actually just noticing that. So, Today was actually forms of the 29th of September, in this case in 2018. So we've got ourselves well, I would say actually today is not 29th. It was the 28th of September. Sorry. So we've only got 3 more days to go until October is about to start, even for the UK version, because obviously North America hasn't got to October just yet though, because of the different time zones and everything like that, which is very understandable. But hey, at least as far as I can noticing that from the start. So here's the third and final ending wheel piece as far as I'm aware, and because of that, we would able to actually do some more platforming, and I believe the third and the final treasure is going to be somewhere almost to the very end right there. So yeah, we recognize most of these enemies here and now as well, even though we've already seen both Waddle Dees and Waddle Doos in some of those worlds throughout the game. However though, I think we saw Gordos, or in this case, well, just a Gordo from any other levels ago, but we have not seen for quite a while is the forms of those little charging enemies. As a result, you know, the ones with the forms of the red bandana or something like that. Basically, these guys makes their return, and the thing is about these guys though, this time, granted because of the absence of the forms of the Kirby ability system, basically in order to actually kill one of those enemies right there, is that you can either just use the projectile to throw at them, and especially noticeable, you can actually use them to stun him, or even you can able to actually perform a ground pound ability, assuming if you actually just use that right, then you would able to actually deal with them just as that. So anyways, let's go ahead and just toss it from here. In fact, I almost get squished by that. And let's go ahead and get our star bead, the glorious star bead from this particular points throughout. So let's go ahead and just... Oh, shoot! I probably should not pay attention to that. So even then, that's okay though, because we still got a gold medal as a result. Now, what makes this world is kind of tricky for the most part though, kind of like how we did in Spaceland, is the fact that there's gonna be some bottomless pits until we get to the next levels throughout. In fact, there won't be any bottomless pits, I don't think, other than the other couple of levels. They always attempt to spawn in those too many spikes. So even then though, that if you accidentally get touched by those spikes, then expecting you would able to actually lose a lot of beads. Even then though, expecting so, then it might be a very tricky world for your first time playing through this, and for several moments notice. But even then though, as long as you know what you're doing, you will be fine for the most part. So even then, because yeah, as you can see, in order to actually deal with these enemies, is that we need to either stun him by the forms of the projectile, and just simply just ground pound in as soon as you well, just kill him. And here we go, we got ourselves these familiar Whispy woods themselves, and speaking of which, at the very end of the level, as you can tell, that we're going to be transforming into ourselves in the forms of the tank mobile, much like how it does it in the Outer Rings, as far as the last level that we did play through. On this, no, it wasn't Outer Rings, it was Moonbase, sorry about that. So yeah, it's kind of cool to able to actually just see that more often throughout. In fact, we might actually... Oh shoot, I forgot about these apples. Basically, and also not to mention though, because of how the fact of the matter is though, is the fact that, yeah, we're actually getting quite close towards the end of the game, and expecting so that we've almost nearly towards at the forms of the 100% completion. So with that being said, yeah, we're getting close towards the end at this point in time, so I'm really looking forward until we're able to actually move on to the next Kirby installment in the series, at least expecting for, you know, Kirby Superstar Ultra for the Nintendo DS, expecting that will be up until eventually until next year. And because of that though, and especially noticeable with the most recent modern Kirby games, like the forms of Kirby's Adventure Wii, or in this case Kirby's Return to Dreamland, and Kirby Triple Deluxe, Kirby Planet Robobot, and especially noticeable with the forms of Kirby Star Allies. So, but again, I'm probably not going to go through Kirby's Extra Epic Yarn on the 3DS Let's Play, because it's basically the exact same game as this, but except the fact that it actually did add in more content than the Wii version does, like the forms of the added challenge mode for once, and expecting so, and especially with the additional minigames where you can play as King Dedede and Meta Knight throughout. So, and here you probably recognize this particular area right there. In fact, we're going to be having a one-on-one fight against with Whispy Woods, kind of like how it did back in 1992, the one that started it all. In fact, this game did actually came out in 2010, which is about I would say 18 years prior to the forms of his first true adventure, excluding for the likes of the UK version, which did came out in 2011, which is about, well, I would say 19 years prior to the forms of ever since his first adventure. So yeah, that's a very compromise there, and yeah, that's what I could really think about for Whispy's Forest. So it's not so difficult of the world, or not so much difficult as far as the level itself as far as it will go, but it wasn't until the third level in this particular world, which I'll say this right now, the third level in this particular world is by far the hardest level in the entire game. But even then, we'll get to that shortly after. But anyways, we've actually unlocked even more missions for both Beatrix Run and Buster's Trading, so even then we'll get to those too when we're able to actually just fully completely done with the actual main worlds, or in this case the main world of Dreamland, or excluding buddy forms of those two secret levels, but even then we'll find out soon enough. So anyways, let's move on to the next level in the forms of Dreamland, and that's the forms of Tempest Towers. This level is very similar to how it does it in Levitated Ruin world in the forms of Sonic and the Secret Rings, because the main gimmick of this level, as you can see right there, is of course the wind. And also this world also reminds me of the forms of the level from Donkey Kong 94 for the Game Boy obviously, which is the world called Just Plain. And the plane, as far as for that world in Donkey Kong 94, is the fact that there's only 8 levels on that particular game, or in this case in that particular world of that game. And also because we have to deal with the wind in the forms of the outside portion of the forms of the plane world in Donkey Kong 94, it also reminds me of that. So anyways, obviously because of how the fact that this world's gimmick, or this level's gimmick, is all about just the wind, and because of that though, sometimes the wind direction attempts to change every nowadays, especially noticeable they keep on like blowing you from the left or to the right, and vice versa. So even then though, there's the bookcase right there, in case if you probably want to decorate that onto your flat, or basically pretty much just your flat in general. So even then though, there's no point for able to actually going after, well, you can technically still get some treasures, unless if you want to get 100% completion of the game, so expecting so that would still manage to make it happen. In fact, for some reason, in the forms of Cap King 74, as far as I've mentioned about this before, for some reason he doesn't bother to the forms of, he can't be able to actually just go ahead and deal with the 100% completion on this particular game itself. Before I continue, there might be something down there, like the forms of those star beads. As far as you can see, I'll just collect them. And in fact, you might actually recognize this music in the background. In fact, this actually resembles Butter Building ever since enjoying the likes of in, well, Kirby's Adventure. So even then though, because we're going to be exploring for the majority of the actual tower, and also as you can see right there, we're most likely familiar with those enemy obstacles here and there, like the forms of these little cannons and stuff like that. But again, I'm not exactly sure what the actual names of the cannon enemies are itself looks like. But again, I must have felt a little bit rusty when it comes to like knowing what enemy's name was. See, Fernando, I really do apologize for this point, folks, but then again, it's most likely a different story. Okay, be very quick right there, because if you want to get the third and final piece of your ending piece, and also there's actually this second treasure that we need to get. In fact, this might be very easy to get, and we got ourselves the pancake pile. Pancake pile, delicious. I'm really big fan of the forms of pancakes, especially with the forms of the golden syrup with it. So even then though, that I always attempt to have those for breakfast. Well, the majority of every single breakfast days, in this case in the mornings, so that's worth mentioning. So anyways though, a few things I want to explain about this is the fact that since we're almost nearly towards at the forms of the October's month at this point. I should probably expect him by the fact that whenever I get back into Mario Tennis Aces for the Nintendo Switch on my own time for a little bit, and because of that, the new update has already been up for this point right now. This means we're gonna have to get ourselves the forms of, I might as well able to get not 1, not 2, but 3 playable characters is now gonna be selectable as the forms of any special updates and stuff, like Koopa Troopa, Blooper, and especially noticeable for Diddy Kong, and I think that's about it, obviously, so I might as well able to get those 3 characters as soon as I manage to get back into the forms of Mario Tennis Aces for quite some time at this point. And I don't suppose to how the fact that I'm pretty sure that PD Piranha is the only definition of the forms of the final character, playable character, at least it all depends on this character selection slot. And because of that, though, I was probably expecting, because of how the fact that they reduced up the size of the forms of the character selection screen ever since day 1 of the forms of Mario Tennis Aces actual game, then expecting so that then yeah. I think this is the only level I seem to able to, whenever first time I've played this game, on this level anyway, I've seemed to accidentally got myself my silver medal in this level, because the trickiest part about this level, though, I will admit though right away, is the forms of the most annoying enemies you're ever going to be encountering in this level, and that will have to be, assuming if we're able to actually just get to this certain point, because thankfully though, the wind doesn't bother me that much, other than if you really want to get those collectibles, especially with those beads, then you have to work with this kind of stuff. This is the enemies I was always going to be a little bit off by it, because as you can see that every single one of these is now going to be able to handle over these missiles, and what makes it extremely dangerous compared to how it does it in those spikes, especially noticeable with bottomless pits altogether. What happens is the fact that if you accidentally get hit by the forms of every single missiles, the explosion depth perception is actually really too easy to get hit. And there's the Butter Building CD right there, so even though if you probably recognize that music, then yeah. Although unfortunately though, I don't think I can able to actually get an opportunities of this little policy sake by the forms of like that Nintendo copyright claims and all that stuff, which again we actually just can you see what I mean? I really hate the Waddle Dees. They always attempt to hand over those missiles at me, because they are extremely dangerous, and also as a result, basically how the fact that if you do not pay attention to that whatsoever, then you will easily gonna get yourself hit a lot, even for the actual hit detection right there with the forms of the missile itself. Oh god. Don't trust this, but hey, at least we're able to get to that point. 1981 marks the exact same number as not only Mario's first appearance, but also by the forms of Donkey Kong 1981 arcade games released. So yeah, there we go. That concludes Tempest Towers, and as you can see, I've got myself my glorious gold medal. So yeah, expecting I was a little bit worried for a second there, because even then, if I get hit a lot and lose a whole bunch of beads, then that will be my worry priority right here. So there we go. We've actually unlocked another 2 minigame challenges. We can able to do those, but not until when we finish up this particular world itself first. So anyways, the patch, as you can see, we've actually unlocked is the forms of the pinwheel patch, and this way it will unlock is probably the most difficult level in the entire game, in my opinion, and that will have to be Cloud Palace. Because, as a result, most of the levels are usually based off from the previous Kirby's past, in the forms of, like, every single levels altogether. Like, for instance, in Whispy's Forest is actually based off from Green Greens, obviously. And, level 2 is the forms of Tempest Towers, which is actually based off from Butter Building. And, also, that since we're going to be moving on to Cloud Palace, this is actually based off from Bubbly Clouds from, well, Kirby's Dream. I really can't speak for this point today, folks, because again, my photo still wasn't exactly pure perfect by any means, but even then, I think I might be still average by any means. But even then, let's go ahead and just swing from, for this point right there, and because of that, we get ourselves the first treasure, the Cloud Rug. Yeah, you probably recognize this music as well, because you especially noticeable if you ever watched the opening cutscene, especially noticeable with the majority of the cutscenes for this matter, ever since, well, after when you complete the Heartland and all that stuff. This plays exactly at the exact same point as the forms of most of the cutscenes in Kirby's Epic Yarn, specifically in the Dreamland portions of the cutscenes, because, well, it's just pure relaxing and simple. And one that I found this level to be extremely difficult compared to the rest of the levels of the game, because if you couldn't tell already, this level is filled with bottomless pits, and as a result, if you accidentally fell off into these bouncy clouds section, you will lose a lot of those beads. Although the actual level itself won't be as hard as it should be done. Oh, and also we got this familiar Cracker right there, which, yes, he'll occasionally try to chase you, but all he did is just basically he'll try to able to zap you and all that stuff. But be very pay attention to that whatsoever, and I don't know why my frame rate on this level almost attempts to drop occasionally, but if you go all the way to the right, as you can see right there, then you were able to actually easily avoid through Cracker right there, and yeah, that's what I can really say about it. And also, taking notice from the original Rayman game for the PlayStation / Sega Saturn, basically we have to keep on doing grabbing those grapple things too many times, kind of like how it did in the forms of, like, let's just say in the a sky level of all sorts. Basically, we need to do that a lot, even for especially noticeable they move all over the place and all that stuff. But you can't hold on to these things for too long, because obviously they do have their own wings. And then whenever they get to the actual, like, let's just say the hole, for instance, as you can see right here, sometimes you're able to actually just about to be, well, gone away. So even then, though, it's not too bad, as you can see right there, because even then, though, that it might be still very difficult, though, because of the actual level layout, assuming if you're able to actually just concentrate the level itself. But again, if you fell into the bottomless pits, like, as you can tell from this point right there, if you lose a whole bunch of beads, then there'll be no way to able to get to you by the forms of the gold medals department. But hey, at least, luckily, though, this might be my successful attempt on this level, actually, even though that I've said this before, this is easily the hardest level in the entirety of Kirby's Epic Yarn so far, even for the true definition of one of the most toughest levels in Kirby's Epic Yarn, expecting so because of how the fact that this is actually at the very end of the game, expecting so for this pretty much. Could imagine that this will actually be the true final level of the game if the platforms will throw you off, which even then, we'll admit that right away, that might be seems the point. So anyways, folks, here's the final transformation in the forms of Kirby's Epic Yarn, which is, if I remember this correctly, this transformation looks so much similar to the likes of how it does it in, the transformation that you get, but it forms in Kirby Superstar, in the forms of Milky Way Wishes. In fact, we're going to be riding on to the forms of the Starship, which fundamentally, it functions the same way as how it does it in Kirby Superstar, except that, also it's very similar to the likes of the Rocket transformation as well, although the noticeable difference is this time is the fact that we're going to go onto horizontal position, whilst the forms of the Rocket is all in vertical. So even then, though, I can definitely expecting there's some differences here and there, but even then, though, expecting so, yeah. Oh yeah, another thing I want to briefly mention about something with, speaking of those, mission challenges and all that stuff. You know I said this before about the fact that they weren't going to be including those secret levels as far as I'm aware for this point? It turns out I was completely wrong about it, because I've looked up on research. In fact, they do have some secret levels. Not all of them, mind you, because of all the focusing on the forms of the transformation sequences and all that stuff. But there we go, we got ourselves the third and final treasure in this level, which we have bubbly clouds. So, yeah, as far as you might as well able to conceive how this will go. And here's the Krakow fight. In fact, since this is actually our second time fighting against with Krakow in this game, especially noticeable by the forms of how the fact that, in fact, this might be very easy compared to how it does in the outer rings, except the fact that, well, obviously we're going to be able to maneuver around throughout in the majority of this sequence in this particular sequence, particularly in again, I really can't speak for this point today, folks, because I know it hasn't been for quite a long while now, ever since whenever I decide to able to discuss upon new things and all that stuff, and plus my throat is still a little bit dried, but even then though, until we get to the final point of this particular game, in fact we haven't got that long left until we're able to actually finish off for this game by the forms of 100%ing it, and especially noticeable with the main game itself. So again, just like in new forms of how it does it in Outer Rings level, you have to keep on shooting at Krakow into its eye, and then once you deal with that, then you pretty much finish up the main level. So yeah, that's all I can really count for that point. So anyways, let's go ahead and finish up the main level. In fact, I think this is the only level I've actually got stuck into whenever first time I played this game, because I did actually test it out before on my own time, and I tried it once, and I found it to be quite a difficult level. So, at least as far as I can tell for that. But again, if you really want to get the gold medal on this level though, good luck, because even then, if you accidentally fall into the bottomless pit, assuming if you don't lose too many of those beads, well, good luck with that as well. So anyways, we've got ourselves the boxing glove patch, so that way we can able to actually unlock the 4th level before the final boss of the game. Can't believe we're going through this game so quickly. Even especially noticeable with the days themselves are actually going really fast as well. So even then though, here's this very fisty boxing glove going on right there. Even for this familiar fists, mainly more accurately King Dedede's stretchy arms as far as I'm aware. Well, it's just like Elastigirl or something like that from the Incredibles and the Incredibles 2. But I digress. So anyways, here we go on to the 4th level in Dreamland, and that is the forms of Castle Dedede. So yeah, you might be recognizing for this particular level itself, especially noticeable how the fact that we're going to be exploring through King Dedede's castle ever since in Kirby's Dreamland 1, especially noticeable with the forms of Spring Breeze in Kirby Superstar, and even especially noticeable by the forms of well, let's just say by the forms of Kirby 64, the Crystal Shards, and especially noticeable with the Dedede's Tower in the forms of, you know, or in this case, Dark Castle from Kirby's Dreamland 2, and even especially noticeable with the iceberg from Dedede's Tower and stuff, and especially noticeable with King Dedede's castle in Kirby Mouse Attack and all that stuff. So that's very obvious for this point right there. In fact, you might actually recognize this background music you can clearly hear is the Gourmet Race ever since in Kirby Superstars. So even then though, expecting so that you might be familiar with that. So yeah, basically this level might actually be one of the longest levels in the entire game so far. I think it's most likely because, first of all, this level is so huge by the looks of all things, and also in addition to those kinds of stuff like this, there's going to be multitude of doors to able to actually explore through, which some doors actually leads you to able to actually get something that's kind of helpful if you really want to get even more beads as a result. But some of these rooms or some of those doors actually leads you to some of those rooms that it's only if you manage to able to get yourselves these treasures from. Mainly in this room, for example, and taking notice by the forms of well, somewhat similar to how it does it in the mini-boss endurance from Kirby's Adventure, and especially noticeable with the forms of the enemy endurance run for the forms of, well, a mini-boss rush run, in the forms of, well, I've already mentioned about the forms of Kirby's Adventure, and Kirby's Dreamland 2, and boss rematches in Kirby's Dreamland 1, and especially noticeable with the mini-boss rematch incarnations of Kirby's Dreamland 2 and Dreamland 3, and especially noticeable with Kirby 64, the Crystal Shards, and even especially noticeable with a whole bunch of enemy encounters in the forms of, well, pretty much every single Kirby game, obviously, except the fact that, obviously we're not able to actually just obtain copy abilities themselves anymore, because obviously we're still on Kirby's Epic Yarn's aesthetics and all that stuff, so we have to utilize the Epic Yarn's main mechanics and all that stuff. So obviously we've already recognized those particular canons ever since in the past adventures of Kirby, ever since I would say from Kirby Superstar, because there weren't exactly any of those canons in the forms of both Kirby's Adventure, Kirby's Dream Land 1, and Kirby's Dream Land 2, but they were technically first introduced in Kirby Superstar for the Super Nintendo, so even then, expecting so for this point and on, so yeah. So yeah, in order to actually get every single treasures in this level though, it's just simply we have to go through every single enemy goblin, and as a result, that if you manage to defeat all of the enemies, I think there are only about 7 of them to deal with right there, whilst 6 in the forms of you want to able to actually go after, well, let's just say 3 for each of the prizes, like in the forms of like, let's just say 3 from the ending piece slices, and also up the other 3 from the treasures themselves. So even then though, every time you defeat one of those enemies, assuming it depends on what one you've last one defeated, basically the estimation mark points were able to appear, and then basically you were able to actually just to transport it all the way to the actual picture frame of what the based off from what enemies you faced. So even then though, that is a very cool touch altogether. So even then though, that yeah, that's a pretty cool stuff altogether throughout. So anyways though, I don't know why I keep on saying altogether, because I'm just singular instead of like me with Chip and all that stuff, which again, it sounds amusing. So anyways, let's get into the actual important announcements, but in forms of gaming related stuff. In fact, there's going to be a new update of the forms of, well, obviously we've already noticed about the fact with the forms of version 4 in Splatoon 2. In fact, I believe, if I were expecting this correctly, is the fact that I'm assuming that Splatoon 2 update version 0.1.0 is going to be on its way, and it looks like it's going to be revealed until at some point in the 3rd of October. So yeah, perfect timing for able to actually just about to be able to doing for those kinds of stuff, even for more things as a result for Splatoon 2, even though it might be very even though we probably not get into Splatoon 2 just yet though, because obviously the Powerpuff Girls still need to get back into the first game in the series, so expecting so for that anyway, you know. Alright, so we've actually got 2 treasures so far, so now we need to get the 3rd and a final treasure at this point, so even then, yeah, self-explanatory for the most part for this level though, but the only thing you need to able to dodge though is the forms of, you know these little, blue, oh no, not the blue stuff, but in the forms of those little cannon shots they, shot at you. Thankfully though, those things don't hurt you unless if you need to able to actually just to dodge, you know, like dangerous hazards and all that stuff, like the explosions and all that stuff, and especially noticeable with these spikes down below, and even spikes on the wall as you can see on screen, and as a result, well, we get to do a lot of like careful positioning timing aspects, so yeah. Oh, we haven't seen these little slimy looking enemies. We haven't seen those for quite a while, ever since entering the likes of I think the only last time we've seen these guys is the forms of like, I can't really tell of what last time we actually see these guys. I think it was like somewhere in the first world of the game, I'm sure enough, but even then, no, it's just that it's so hard sometimes, because if you think about it, you're actually going to be proceeding onto the next few portions of the game so far, but then expecting so you might actually lose your memories for quite some time for able to actually just carry on with what you're doing. So yeah, that's the only problematic I feel like, but hey. Alright, so let's move on to this next section right there, and basically, obviously, we need to avoid spike walls, and especially noticeable like this, for instance. Although, the good thing about it, though, is the fact that I'm assuming those beads doesn't split out apart, I don't think, but they're normally close to each other, I think. But even then, if you're able to actually grab that, so. But yeah, with those little cannons right there, or in this case, those little cannonballs, they don't hurt you unless if they about to do a little bit of a explosion effects going on. So even then though, yeah, let's just go ahead and just get into this door right here, and because of that, we might as well able to get ourselves the 3rd and the final treasure in this level. So this might be a little bit tricky for the most part though, because unlike in most of the any other previous levels that you actually did manage to explore through, I don't suppose those enemies doesn't respawn though every time you kill them, because you only have to do is like 1% chance of this, because if you do this right enough, then you weren't able to actually get yourselves the 3rd and final treasure. But if you don't, if you do make several mistakes, like I didn't do that right there, basically, in order to actually, the only option left now is the forms of trying to do the level again. So even then, though, expecting so, then yeah. So we have the gourmet race. So there we go. So now we just need to finish up the main level itself, and after all that, then we can able to actually finish up the main game. So even then, though, excluding buddy forms of those you know, challenges and all that stuff we love to do until whenever we get to that certain point. So let's go ahead and just deal out with the forms of that giant Waddle Dee, and it doesn't matter which pathway you want to go to, even though no, it doesn't really matter, other than, well, you can just simply, we need to able to actually just access to that point. So even then though, let's go ahead and unravel the Waddle Dee poster, and that way we could able to actually unzip that section right there. In fact, Yin Yan, or in this case, that little, yeah, Yin Yan is now going to be taking over Dreamland, but of course we do need to stop him once and for all. So expecting so that we could able to restore peace of the forms of Dreamland itself. So even then, all we need to do now is basically we need to carefully time our shots correctly with the actual cannons themselves, and boom, we are done with Castle Dedede. So yeah, let's see what rewards we can get. I didn't get that much, but oh well. Beats doesn't really matter though, other than just buying a last few items from the actual shops itself. I'm presuming that we might actually buy the majority of the furnitures at the very end, because we haven't got that much left as far as 100% completionists will go, aside from grinding more of those fabrics, but that's besides the point. So here's the Bells of Joy patch. So even then, we might as well able to activate that in just a moment. In fact, we might actually activate it just about right about now, and we would able to unlock the final boss of the game. And he's super mad. So yeah, every time you activate the bell, then this happens. Basically, the entire background is now into the actual darkness itself, and basically, Yin Yan is now appeared, and basically we need to stop him once and for all by that little familiar portal right there. So anyways though, yeah, I guess we'll have the endings off just at this point right there. So join me next time on Let's Play Kirby's Epic Yarn. Is the fact that we're going to be taking down Yin Yan once and for all, and eventually excluding buddy forms of the final 2 levels throughout the game. So even then, no expecting so for that anyway. So see you guys next time. Later, fellas.